Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Shakespeare's social context in regards to Romeo and Juliet. So let's identify first and define the idea of social context. What is that? Social context refers to the immediate physical and social setting in which people live or in which something happens or develops. So this is the environment of people that surround something's creation or its intended audience. So when you think about Shakespeare's writing or any movie you see or any novel that you read, you really have to think about the social context of that novel. If you're reading something that took place, 500 years ago, you really need to think about what was going on in the world at the same time that novel was written. The same is true for Shakespeare. When Shakespeare was writing his plays, his world looked very different than our world looked. So we really need to take that into consideration when we look at what he wrote and how we react to it. So when you consider the social context of a novel or a play, you need to think about what was going on in the world at the time the novel was written. You should contemplate things such as history, culture, religious beliefs, philosophical thought, and values of the author's society. Now, when we think about the context of Romeo and Juliet, 1300 AD in Verona in the Dark Ages, that's a very different looking time period than the one that we have. So let's take a look at the timeline for Shakespeare was between 1485 and 1603. Had just transitioned out of the Dark Ages. Catholicism was a very big and dominant religion in his time period. Theater was the main source of entertainment. So think about what your main sources of entertainment are now. How is that different from what Shakespeare's experienced in his time? It was normal for the crowd to engage with the actors by heckling them, throwing items at them, rotting lettuce, etc. Child death was very common, as well as dying in labor. Medical advances were not where they are today, and disease ran rapid throughout the environment. The plague was very dominant during Shakespeare's time, and so plague and death and all dying young were all things that his audience had to contend with. So there were also things that he brought out in his plays. They were all topics that he addressed at various times in his plays or his sonnets. So when you think about the importance of context to Shakespeare, think about why it's important to understand this type of information about Shakespeare's plays. And then think about, too, Romeo and Juliet, as I'd mentioned a little bit ago, took place in 1300 in the Dark Ages in Verona, Italy. So think about the context, the type of life that somebody who was young, like Juliet, would have lived in that time period. It would have been very normal for her parents to arrange a marriage for her to have no say in the person that she spends the rest of her life with or who she marries. Her life expectancy would have been low, so she would have been expected to marry young. She would have been expected to have children young, and she would have been expected to be subservient to that, to her spouse. So think about the context, how different it is now for young women, and what they experience versus what Juliet, our main character, Romeo and Juliet, experienced in her lifetime.